Cardiff v Everton 1977, FA Cup 5th round. In this video, we rewind to 1977 and a time when football hooliganism was quite the norm. This particular event was an FA Cup 5th round tie between Cardiff and Everton. This was before Cardiff Soul Crew and Everton County Road Cutters, and just shows how top firms can have a bad day out. Let's hear the stories. Cardiff fan Ryan told us, "We played Everton at Ninian Park 1977. They bought about 4,000, but their firms were arriving in little groups of a dozen or so at a time. The Bob Bank was split down the middle by a flimsy fence that was put up after the major trouble with Man United 1974. Everton were in the Canton stand side of the Bob Bank. The fence didn't really solve anything. A crowd of 34,000 and 4,000 Cardiff on the Bob Bank means trouble every time. This was the biggest slaughter I've ever seen at Ninian Park. Everton were in trouble before the match with Cardiff, picking off their smaller firms all morning long. Everton's main firms came by train, which stopped literally outside the ground on a couple of football specials, which was a new tactic not seen at any other ground. They then entered the Bob Bank without facing any Cardiff. This meant that we knew our only chance of picking off their main firm was inside the ground. Then when Everton got into the Bob Bank, Cardiff boys just walked around the fence and battered them. Everton lads wore straight jeans and mohair jumpers, whereas we still had donkey jackets and pit boots. When Duncan McKenzie scored for them with a hand-assisted goal, all hell broke loose, and a major attack from feral Cardiff fans took place. The fence gave way and Everton's lads started to retreat. Most of them didn't want to know, apart from a couple of beer monsters who tried to fight back, but it was a massacre. Everton started to run down the slope of the Bob Bank and out of the exit gates. When I looked outside, 2 special trains were already filling up with Everton, who had legged it back to the trains, and it was only 20 past 4. Cardiff fans were now rampant, and some chased Everton fans to the trains, where they stormed the platform to finish off the Everton by actually getting on the trains and battering them. The few police had no control whatsoever. There were Everton fans running down the tracks towards where they didn't know. I know Everton had quite a bad reputation before they arrived, but I would estimate that only 10% of Everton's mob was left at the end. The rest were back on the trains or still running to Merseyside. I was in a bar in Amsterdam in the 2000s when I met an older guy who happened to be an Everton fan. I asked him if he went to this match, and he turned white. He said it was the worst away game he ever went to in his whole life of supporting Everton. His words were a nightmare from start to finish, Nuff said. Everton fan and County Road Cutter member Andy told us, "Cardiff away in 77 was second worst away day ever for me. In the 70s we could be hit or miss away from Goodison. We had a few good hidings away from the actual ground, but at Cardiff in 77 and Newcastle we were attacked inside the ground, which was quite unusual. Both were bad, but Newcastle was the worst for me as there was no escape. At least at Cardiff the exits were open and allowed our fans to escape. I have respect for the Cardiff lads there that day, because they allowed our youngsters to escape. They could have battered them that day, but they let them escape, so fair play for that. The rest of us were battered, however. I mean, I don't think it was as bad as Cardiff make out, saying that only 10% of us were left at the end. It was more like 50%, but a lot had had enough by the end, and had already left for the trains which were waiting outside the ground. I've heard other firms had a tough day out at Cardiff, so there's no embarrassment to say they battered us both inside and outside. But it wasn't the massacre they make it out to be. We had a lot of scarfers who just wanted to go to Cardiff because it was the FA Cup, so they probably didn't expect to be attacked by grown minors speaking a strange language. Our firms arrived in pockets rather than in a mob, and that didn't help. All in all, a nightmare from start to finish is an apt description of the day. I would rather forget it, but I can't, of course. But as I say, Newcastle away the same season was even worse. I suppose you got to have a bit of karma after some terrible beatings we have given out to away fans at Goodison. Still happy memories all in all, though. We thank Ryan and Andy for their recollections. It's clear that Everton took a bit of a beating this day, and just goes to show that home form means nothing when you meet your match. Don't forget to share and like and even subscribe if you haven't already.